Redrawing old art is always fun to do because it's a great way to measure progress and also a great way to see your mistakes.
I'm White Manga and welcome to the channel, and I'm just going to be briefly talking about the decisions that I've made, walking you through my process and talking about the things I'm going to do differently and maybe why the things I did before didn't work out or would work much better. So here I've taken a cell shading route and a couple of liberties here, so it's still different from the original illustration, but I'm doing something that I feel is what I would have done today if I was attempting to recreate the same illustration. But for the most part, this isn't like a tutorial. I'm just going to be talking about, stories behind the illustration and little things here and there that I feel would be interesting for you guys. But if you're interested in a more in-depth tutorial on how I do cell shading illustrations, I have a separate video on that, and I will link to that as well in the video cards and maybe in the description as well.
Obviously, there was a lot that went into me improving, and I don't believe I'll be able to get into everything in one single video, but one of it was also learning color theory and understanding what color to use and what tone to use, what tint to use as well. Not picking colors that are too saturated. Like if you look at the original, you see like say the yellow in the skin is too saturated. It's not even close to being realistic. I know it's a cartoon, but it's just demanding your attention almost as much as the red in the background. So it's stuff like that, color theory, or just understanding how colors interact with a certain environment, things of that nature, and online resources that are related to that, and also looking at how other artists handle that, I think also helped along the way. And to an extent, redrawing or this draw this again meme or whatever you want to call it, it's also a great way to measure your progress and find mistakes. And drawing the same thing all over again, maybe after a couple years of practice, is just, a good way to visualize all of that.
Anyways, before we dive into it, I really appreciate if you guys hit the like button, subscribe, hit that bell so you stay notified each time I upload absolutely anything. And, for those who have purchased my books, because I'm a published creator of Apple Black, publishing serialized Saturday AM, you can read free chapters. All the links you could possibly need, including my social media, are in the links below. But for those who have gone out there and purchased the books, and, it's still selling, and it's been a while since it's been released, I'd like to thank you guys for that. Apple Black Volume 3 is in the works, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Because one key thing in learning how to improve is knowing where you make mistakes, being honest with yourself, and being able to spot your errors and correct them. However you want to do it is up to you. Just make sure that you're able to look back at your work, take a step back, spot the mistakes, and correct them. That is key. And then obviously after a while, when you do stuff like this and you feel like you've made a lot of progress, that can be very rewarding, especially if you do a lot of stuff and practice a lot and you don't get to see it that often, you don't get to see your progress that often. Sometimes it can be demoralizing, but so another thing you need to instill in yourself is patience.
As you can see, we sketch. I make sure I do it in layers and I'm not thinking of too many things at once. This is something I didn't do before, where I just draw the pose and focus just on the pose, forgetting about the face or the expression that he's going to make. Maybe I think about it, but briefly. It's not the main focus at that moment. I'm putting in all the features that the original illustration had with the beard and stuff like that. I removed the coat. I wanted to do something a little different, maybe a pose cooler, but still reminiscent of what I did before. So the character is still, is chilling with one arm and one hand behind his head, and but in this case, he's not like wearing a blazer; it's just hanging over his shoulder. I kept some of the iconography in the hair, kept that intact with a little twist to it. I think at the end of the day, the illustration ended up looking a little bit like one of the characters from Tekken, Jin Kazama or Kazuya or some kind of mix. And maybe that was where my head was at the time when this illustration was done, maybe when I did it. And again, speaking of the original, it was at the time where I was just learning about Photoshop for the first time. So it was a very early version of Photoshop. And I was, playing around with the smudge tool and blur and things like that. But the illustration initially was just a drawing, just a sketch, or I think I did it with the ink, straight with ink or something like that, and it wasn't, I didn't think too much of it, but I had Photoshop, or I had access to Photoshop at the time, and I just wanted to test things out. And it was kind of one of those illustrations that was going from traditional to digital. So I scanned in the work, didn't scan it in properly. I would scan it in differently if I did it today. And I also have a video on scanning if any of you are interested in that. And it was the first time I was seeing Photoshop, so everything was so cool and new, and at the time I thought it was so dope, you know, and there was so much to play with, so it was also overwhelming. And a part of me was like, you know, I'm never gonna learn all of this stuff, and you know, maybe I stick with, and I still haven't learned all of all of it, but at the time, you know, maybe I'd stick with traditional or stuff like that, and I wouldn't need any of this. But I think with a little practice, watching tutorials, keeping track of what's going on with other artists, getting inspired, I think it was easy for me to kind of just jump into it, especially when internet started to really kick in, and YouTube and tutorials and stuff like that make things a whole lot easier. And as you can see, I'm kind of doing the same thing and helping others draw what they want. So this was great for me. Again, doing everything in layers. I did the sketch. I had a different layer for the clothing, putting the clothing on. So I'm just focusing on things step by step, which is something I didn't do before. Here, focus on the pose. Then I focus on what he's gonna wear. Then I focus on, okay, how does the hairstyle look? Now so it's like you're not thinking about too many things at once. Because once you start thinking of a lot of things at the same time, you can easily, you know, get sidetracked or feel overwhelmed. So, and I didn't want to feel that way. And then for the arts technique, coloring technique I'm going for here is, again, cell shading. And I feel like at the time that's what I wanted to do, at least something similar to it, because that's what we're really exposed to for the most part, especially when it comes to animated illustrations. This was a blast for me to do. It was also a blast to look back in the past. One thing I realized is, like, unlike a bunch of other artists on YouTube, I don't have access to all the illustrations I did as a kid. Like, I just don't have access to it. In fact, they'd be in a different country or in the trash, or like, the only reason I found this illustration is because I posted it to my Facebook page. So it was done in 2008, and so it's 10 years later because it's 2018. Got the idea to do this illustration from other art friends like ZHC and the box office artists and Cartoon Block and stuff like that, and decided to post a more in-depth discussion about it on my channel and the things I did, I feel like I've done to kind of improve or level up, at least in my eyes. And so yeah, this was fun to do, and a lot of people have done this, you can say, challenge in a way before, and I hadn't done it on this channel, so I thought, you know, it'll be nice to do it and go into more depth talking about it. So here I'm doing cell shading. I put the tone, I put the, you know, the shadows, and eventually I'll put in the light. Here I'm doing something a little red, reminiscent of where the character is, because if you look at the original illustration, he's in this kind of red, misty environment, but it doesn't reflect on his character. Like, it doesn't reflect on his body or his clothing or anything about the character. So with this, I'm changing that, and that's why the shading here, I've decided to go with something red and stuff like that. And then for the lighting on it, is almost like maybe a different light that's not red shining on him, coming from the left, to just maybe help the character pop a little bit. And you know, that was my goal with this illustration, something simple. And then I'll make it look like an anime screenshot. This was fun. It kind of reminded me of back in the day, and I can see why people like doing these kind of illustrations, because it kind of shows growth. And really easy, the things I did to grow is just take advantage of the internet and the online resources available. So YouTube tutorials. I didn't use that many books to learn anatomy and stuff like that, but you know, whatever I could get my hands on. Comic books, if I saw a pose that I liked, I tried to recreate that, and maybe recreate it without looking. You know, how to use Photoshop, like, that's a different beast. How to draw, that's one beast, but then how to use Photoshop, that's a different thing. And there's so many online resources available for you to take advantage of. And you know, drawing muscles, where did the muscles go, so everything doesn't look all weird. Just practice learning to finish illustrations when you start, because a lot of times people start illustrations that they don't finish, and like, I did a lot of that. And I also looked at a lot of artists for inspiration, so I did a lot of copying, and I did a lot to find my style. And I've also been influenced by creators and artists and film directors and all sorts of people beyond just manga and comics, and that's another thing that I recommend people do. I think I've also improved traditionally. I've also improved when it comes to making comics, like what does it mean to make a comic. So another thing that helped me improve was look at other artists and almost put myself in their shoes and try to understand why they made the decisions that they've made. Sometimes that helps you just understand the piece itself and just understand how they work and what techniques they use. So from a philosophical, critical standpoint, you want to improve your mind, but then you want to improve your skills, and then you want to be aware of the tools, and then how to use those tools. That's a different journey. And eventually, after a couple of years, and in this case 10 years, it all comes together, and they all lend, you know, knowledge and experience in just everything to one another, and so you start to improve on all fronts. As a comic book creator, the same thing goes with writing and dialogue and all this kind of stuff. You use all the resources you can get your hands on to improve yourself on that front.
One of the cool things about this illustration here, the sketch, especially the original, is that it was just off the cuff. I don't think I was thinking about much when I was drawing it. Even the clothing is inspired from my school clothing. The tie is very reminiscent of the tie I wore in school, like the school uniform and the white shirt and the blue blazer. It's reminiscent of my school uniform in high school when I was in Nigeria, and I think that's where that came from. This illustration is just, it was just, you know, whatever. It was like a sketch, and you know, look here, years later, we're still, you know, doing it. And it's kind of cool.
I don't want this video to drag on too long. I think I could dedicate a whole different video on how to improve and how to find your art style, and I've made videos like that on this channel already, but I think I can make updated versions of those. So if you're interested, you can just let me know. So don't forget to like this video, hit the subscribe button. Hope you guys enjoyed this illustration, and hope you guys, you know, agree and see the improvements I'm talking about. At least it's my opinion, and you guys can leave your own opinions as well. Again, subscribe, hit the bell so you stay notified each time I upload anything. Watch other videos because I have all sorts of cool videos. Thanks for everybody who has already subscribed, purchased my books, watched my videos, likes my videos, leaves comments. And again, we can have discussions into the comment section, talk about whatever beyond this topic, or any questions you may have for me personally. If you want to commission me, there's details on that in the description as well. 2 free months of Skillshare, details on that as well. So yeah, so I'm Manga, and I'm out.